There we go. So we have primarily we're going to talk about the widening of Beltline. So let me share my screen and you can see the agenda and a couple of other things.
Rick, you need to mute.
Okay, that should work. Good. Our usual mechanism to do this meeting is to have everybody introduce themselves in order. And since there's so many of us, I will call on you to introduce yourself if you don't mind. And basically your names and how long you've lived in the neighborhood. We won't worry so much about where in the neighborhood you live. So, and please don't leave. Let's start with Joel and Callan. Please introduce yourselves.
We're Joel and Callan Corn. We've been here about 10 years.
Thank you. And if you're a board member, please identify yourself as such, and I should do that now. I'm John Belcher, co-chair, and I've been here about 10 years as well. Claire, would you like to introduce yourself? Claire Strawn.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Claire Strawn. I live on Horn Lane for the past 12 years or so, and I'm the co-chair.
And Joshua.
I don't get it.
I'm Joshua Keelis, and I've been here about 5 years, and I'm on the board.
Thank you. Beth.
Where is it?
Which Beth?
Beth Parsons, sorry.
To get a notice about it. Yeah,
I'm Beth Parsons, and I live on Sunny, and I've lived here about 18 years, and happy to be here.
show you, but
Thank you.
I'm trying to.
Becky, could you introduce yourself and then mute yourself, please?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, ma'am. Becky
And
Riley.
I'm not muted. Sorry. Thank you. I'm Becky Riley. I've been here for 32 years.
Thank you. Dwight Owens.
Dwight Owens, board secretary. I live just off Maxwell.
Thank you. Carlene and Pat Riley.
Here we are. We've been married for 43 years or so.
Thank you.
I've been here most of that time.
You thank you too. Carol Hockman. Okay, we'll come back to Carol. Jan Spencer.
This is Jan. Hi, everybody. I live on Benjamin. I'm on the board and I've lived here for 22 years.
And thank you, Jan, for organizing the meeting's topic tonight. Next is Mark. I don't see a last name.
Yeah, this is Mark. I'm over on Arbor Drive, lived here for 25 years.
Thank you, Mark. Bev Barr. Okay, let's go to Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin on Hanson Lane. I've been here for 30 years.
Thank you, Rick.
Hey, John, there
yes.
was a question in the chat if we could stop screen sharing so we could see everybody's face during introductions.
Okay, I can do that.
And while you're doing that, I can introduce myself. I'm Harry Sanger, treasurer of the board over on Rosewood Avenue.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Bruce Evelyn.
And 2 years later, exactly to the date on Valentine's Day in 1967.
Bruce, I'm sorry, you're muted. And somebody else has got a TV going. Could you mute yourself?
Okay, sorry. Lived here about 21 years and we live over on Hardy Avenue.
Thank you. Kevin Reed, one of our speakers tonight, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kevin Reed. I'm the chair of the Northeast Neighborhood Association. I also own a house over on Carbona, and I've lived in Eugene for 64 years.
Okay, while we're dealing with speakers. Franny Brindle, would you please introduce yourself?
I will. I'm Franny Brindle. I'm with the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I'm the area manager.
Thank you. Kelly and Lee Pembleton.
Hi, we're Kelly and Lee Pembleton. We live on River Road near Razor Park, and we're coming up on almost 3 years here.
Thank you. Michelle Renee.
Hi, Michelle Renee on Horn Lane, and we've been here going on 21 years now.
Okay, thank you. Rob Zako, another presenter.
I'm Rob Zako. I'm Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. I've lived in the Amazon neighborhood for 27 years. Happy
Thank
to
you,
be.
Rob. I see the name Carolyn Keener.
I'm Jerry, and my wife will probably be in here. We're the Keeners. We've been on Custer Court for 55 or 6 years.
Great, thank you. Terry Waldron. Terry, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Terry Waldron, and I live on Rosewood Avenue, and I've been here for 3 years.
Everybody keeps moving around. Hopefully I'll get this right. Teresa Dameron, thank you.
I'm Teresa Dameron. My husband Nathaniel should be around during the evening also. We have lived in the neighborhood we live on Howard Avenue right now, and we've lived in the neighborhood for 36 years.
Thank you. Julie Hume.
Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. My husband and I have lived on River Road for 38 years. Good to see you.
Jill Switzer.
Hi, I'm Jill Switzer. We've lived in the River Road area for 8 years.
Thank you. Jolene Simpson.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jolene Simpson. We've lived in River Road for over 30 years on Hawthorne Avenue.
Thank you. We have someone who is Zoom user. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Is that me? I'm Kathy Martini.
Yep. Hi,
Live
Kathy.
on River Road, owned the property for 23 years.
Thank you. Dan Morishak.
You.
Hi, I'm Dan Maruschak. I've
Sorry.
been in the neighborhood for about 2 years.
Thank you. Misty Frost.
Hello, Misty Frost. And I have been living on Corliss Lane for over 6 years now.
Okay, Jim Bronson.
Jim Bronson, and moving into a new home that's being built as we speak in November.
All right. Now I'm sure I'm going to double up on people. Catherine Hunt, have I asked you to introduce yourself yet?
No, Catherine Hunt. I live on Hanson Lane with my husband for the last 26 years.
Thank you. Patrick and Darcy Carey.
This is Patrick Kerr, up here in the Santa Clara Community Organization for 16 years.
Good enough. Joshua pointed out that there are 80 of us here. Maybe we should just do names. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, Sarah and Gladney and Linda. I guess I'm doing that. So go ahead, tell us who you are.
I'm Sandra. She's Linda.
I'm Linda. We've lived here
Thank you.
for we lived for 22 years.
Rob Interfeld.
Hi, I'm Rob Interfeld, Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Eugene Public Works. And I've lived in the Laurel Hill Valley neighborhood and worked for the City of Eugene for around 15.5 years.
Thank you for coming and presenting as well. And the same for Mark Rabinowitz. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Mark Rabinowitz. I don't live in River Road, but I've lived in Eugene for 24 years.
Thank you. Shava Cronin.
Hi, Hava Cronin.
Thank you. Jason Schreiner, sorry.
Jason Schreiner, almost 18 years, Hodson Lane.
Sandy Goldie.
Hi, I'm Sandy Goldie, moving into the same house with Jim Bronson in November.
All right. Ellen Rifkin.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I've been in the neighborhood for 16 years.
Okay. Keith Higgins.
Thank you. I am Keith Higgins from Yapoa Terrace. I am monitoring the meeting and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Sandra
Happy Val-
Bishop. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm good.
Lived for 40 years in Jefferson West Side and moved to the South Hills a couple years ago. And I work in Santa Clara out River Road. So I'm
There
very
we go.
interested in this project. Thanks.
Okay, I've had 4 people now tell me that this is taking too long. So if the rest of you don't mind, you are here and we appreciate it. So I'm bowing to popular demand. So first thing, if you are, well, everybody, please sign in by sending a direct message to Charlesy. I'll go ahead and share my screen that has that information. And then we can get started. So the document in the lower left-hand corner says, to be considered an RRCO member in good standing, we need your name, street address, phone number, and email address. Phone number is optional to sign in order to be eligible to vote in next month's neighborhood election. So if you're a guest like Rob Zako, it'd be great if you just type your name into the chat and say guest, and then we'll have a record of our attendance, which is something we have to report to the city. So thank you. Okay, so the next part of our meeting is announcements. I will start with telling you how our, excuse me, I'm having trouble multitasking. We had a food drive yesterday at the River Road Parks and Recreation District. Thanks to them for letting us use their parking lot. We learned that having a food drive on Super Bowl Sunday and also a home game for the women's basketball team is not a good idea. We only got about 113 pounds, but 113 pounds is about 130, well, 103 lunches or dinners for folks, so that's not a bad thing. Does anybody else want to make an announcement? I do have a timer here. You're limited to 2 minutes, and the way to do that would be to raise your hand in the chat, although I do see Claire Strawn if you would go first.
Okay, so most of you know that we have 4 seats open for the board, and the work of the board is to do the work of the neighborhood and try and organize the neighbors and facilitate their voice in important issues. So we really encourage people to step up to run as a board candidate. In order to do that, on the RRCO website, there under news, I think it is, there are links, one for the board job description and another for an application to be a candidate for the board. And then next month, then we're going to post the summary of people's statements so that you all can review them in March before we vote at the next general meeting. And as John said in the beginning, to be able to vote, you have to have attended a meeting in the past year and given us your contact and street address. And we're very excited for the large participation. So thank you. And we so far have about 6 people signed up to run for the board. And we just want a healthy democratic process where we can give people opportunity for leadership. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Claire. A couple of short things. In order to run for the board, you also have to attend a meeting within the past year and be a member in good standing. And we will invite all the board candidates to attend next week's board meeting to ask any questions they would like. Harry.
There. So I'd just like to echo what John said about the food drive. Thank you to all the board members and the neighbors who volunteered to spend your Super Bowl Sunday helping to collect food. I think it will feed over 100 families. So to me, this past week had some high points and low points for the River Road Community Organization. The high point was the successful food drive. The low point was when the Social Justice Committee locked the public out of a public meeting. Unfortunately, I also experienced another low point as a recent discussion turned to an equation of conservatism to racism, an attitude that seems all too prevalent in our neighborhood and has the potential to turn away more conservative neighbors who simply believe in principles of limited government, but are not driven by biased treatment of others who are different from them. I don't think it is a coincidence that some of our left-leaning neighbors believe they hold a moral high ground that allows them to mistreat neighbors like me who might lean more to the right without a fear of reprisal. It is just my personal opinion, but I find this ever-increasing drive for control disruptive and counterproductive to the goals of RRCO. We speak of wanting all neighbors to be involved and feel welcomed, and I urge all of us to continue working to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Any other folks wanting to make announcements? I see none. Why don't we
Yes,
move?
Jan has his hand up.
Okay, Jan. Jan, you're muted. Jan, you were still muted.
Okay, after this evening's RRCO meeting at 8:30, for those who would like to continue the discussion about Beltline, highways, and the future, we're going to meet at a different Zoom address. And I just put that Zoom address into the chat. So that'll be continuing this evening's discussion at a different Zoom address after tonight's RRCO meeting. So feel free to join us.
Thank you, Jan. Okay, a reminder for two more people. Misty. Misty, I believe you're muted.
Sorry, you can go to the next one.
Okay, well, you're the last one
Oh,
that I see.
okay. So tonight is public comment, and we're hoping folks, if you're not too involved with tonight, jump over to the city council meeting and support protections for renters. And yeah, we need support for renters. I'll share more information in the chat.
Great, thank you, Misty. Okay, I see no more hands raised, so let's go ahead and start our program. Franny, and well, let me, if you look on my shared screen, you'll see the agenda. Part one is about what is the River Road project, Beltline widening project. We have 20 minutes of information from both Franny Brindle from ODOT, Rob Innerfeld from the City of Eugene Transportation Organization, and Rob Zako of BEST. We'll follow that with 12 minutes of presentation from supporters of the project, another 12 from opponents of the project, and then we'll open it up for question and answers until 8:30. So without further ado, why don't I turn it over to Franny and Rob? Thank you, as in Innerfeld, and then we'll go to Rob Zako. And I've got a timer up to help you follow your time.
Okay, well, thank
Let
you.
me know
Wait,
if you want to share.
Hey,
screen.
Franny, hang on a second. John,
Okay.
I'm the one who's going to be sharing the presentation. It won't let me share my screen.
Joshua, can you allow Rob to share his screen?
Go ahead.
It says you cannot start screen sharing while the other participant is sharing. So whoever is sharing now needs to unshare.
Okay,
first.
I will unshare.
Great.
Well, while that's all happening, again, my name is Franny Brindle, and I'd like to thank John Belcher for inviting me tonight. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm what you call an area manager, which means that I'm kind of in charge of project development and project construction within Lane County on the state highway system. So that's my charge. And I used to live in the River Road neighborhood when I first landed in Eugene back in 1981. I lived on Manzana, and then I lived on Court Street with my brother. So I'm familiar with the neighborhood, and it's great to be here with you tonight, River Road community. So tonight I've been asked to share about the Beltline, the Randy Pappy Beltline project, and where we've been, what the project entails. And then I'm going to have Rob also talk, but let me kind of do an overview of the project. So the project area, which is under first project corridor study that was done in 2014, starting in 2014. And the project area is from the Delta Beltline Highway interchange to River Road. And some of you probably know that in this area, we have done some operational improvements to try to keep traffic flow as optimized as possible. There's been ramp meters, there's been traffic signal timing operations. And that is what ODOT generally tries to do before we look at any kind of infrastructure widening, is we try to find operational improvements that will improve. Now, the first project in this area was the first phase of the Delta Beltline project, which you saw just got completed. And that was, again, a transportation operational project, really. It wasn't meant to increase lanes. It was meant to improve the flow of traffic. And I've heard good reviews on it. I've heard some, mixed reviews, but for the most part, we think it's improved situation.
Well, Franny, can I just jump in on that a sec? It was also to make the interchange safer, because what was happening was people that were getting off of eastbound Delta Highway were merging with people who wanted to people were getting off of eastbound Beltline to go north, were merging onto Delta Highway at the same time that people on northbound Delta Highway wanted to go westbound on Beltline. And it was not a safe area for people to be. And so now those movements have been separated. And so that was really one of the benefits of the work that's been done so far, by having that new signal for people that want to go from eastbound to northbound. So go ahead, Franny.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. So the need of the problem with the Beltline Highway is it's a 1950s facility. It was not really constructed for today's traffic volume and load. The interchanges are considered too close together. And as Rob just pointed out, the merging distance is not adequate, really, and safe. So it's one of the most congested places in the Eugene-Springfield area. And it's really the only way to cross the Willamette River in North Eugene. It's got outdated short entrance ramps and limited space for merging, which contributes to congestion and safety issues, particularly between River Avenue and Division Avenue and Delta Highway. So the solution was to do a facility plan that recommended several projects, and these projects were to widen the Beltline Highway to 3 lanes in each direction from River Road to Delta Highway to improve safety and mobility, replace the existing bridges over the Willamette River for both resilience and for congestion, and add a new local bridge to address multimodal and local connectivity issues. These projects could be constructed in phases. So Rob, can you move to the next slide that would show the improvements? By the way, this is found on the ODOT website. If you go to ODOT.gov, Transportation Gov, and you can actually get to projects described. So the project in general has, you could see the improvements to North Delta, some of which we've already completed. You can see that we've taken out the ramp on the southeast side and made improvements for eastbound Delta, Beltline to southbound Delta, and did a new bridge that would take the ramps, to connect to westbound. The next phase of the Delta Beltline project is to improve the ramps on the north side and to improve the connections going westbound Randy Pappy Beltline Highway. And you can see that there's a local bridge. It's called the New Bridge to Serve Local Traffic. That connects Green Acres Road to Division. And then there's an offshoot that goes to Beaver Hunsicker. Another improvement is at River Avenue, and there were two options that were studied for the River Avenue interchange. One that would go under the Beltline and one that would go over. In outreach with the Citizens Advisory Committee, the option that they liked and preferred was the overpass, the one that takes River Avenue, over the Beltline. And then there's some connections for a bike path on both sides and to connect bike and ped facilities between the north and the south over the Beltline itself. And then you can see that there's a widening the Beltline Highway to 3 lanes, and they're called auxiliary lanes because what they do is they are widening between the interchange. So between the interchanges of Delta and River Road, there's an additional lane in each direction that would go over a new highway bridge on the Beltline. And what that does is it increases the capacity on the Beltline over the river, which is where our biggest congestion point is. And then the local arterial bridge, the one that is from Goodpasture Island Road to Division, is supposed to take about 25% of the traffic off of the Beltline. So for that reason, it was felt that the traffic numbers projected, even with the development that's projected to 2035, showed that the traffic numbers would be accommodated with 1 additional lane as an auxiliary lane on the Beltline and this local arterial bridge. Now, the local arterial bridge serves to take basically the traffic that are local trips to and from shopping to the community. It also will serve to take bike and ped traffic and transit. So LTD would have an ability to have an east-west route. And we are not at the design phase of the project of what the local arterial looks like, but we would most likely be talking and partnering with LTD, City of Eugene, ODOT, getting together and figuring out funding and what that arterial bridge will look like. You see, so then the next improvements would be to update and modernize the interchange at Division. The connection from Division and River Avenue, where River Avenue and Division comes into River Road, and then to update the interchange at River Road and Beltline Highway. As many of you do know, that LTD is also hoping to modernize their transit on River Road itself. And so when it's time to do this design at this interchange of River Road and Beltline, we'll be having conversations with the city, of course, and with LTD to make sure we would accommodate transit. And my understanding is that there would be most likely an MX for the River Road Avenue. So that in a nutshell is what the project is proposed to do. We are in what we call a NEPA phase, or an environmental study. And so basically what we've done is looked at the traffic, looked at what could be accommodated for a build, and put together a concept level plan and a layout of what would work to solve the problem, to solve the purpose and need of the project. And
Excuse me,
then-
Franny, you and Rob have 4 minutes and 45 seconds
Okay,
left.
all right. And then with that, we've done an environmental study and looked at impacts for everything from biology to economic to right-of-way impacts, et cetera. And we're just about finished with that study. It's set to be completed anytime and signed off by Federal Highway. Rob, I'm sorry, I'll turn it over to you. I
Okay,
didn't
no
mean to
worries. So
hog all the time.
this is what the bridge would look like, the local arterial bridge, which is shown on yellow on the right. And it could have 2 general purpose lanes in each direction. It could also have 1 bus lane in each direction and 1 general purpose lane. It could also just have 1 vehicle lane in each direction. This was done for NEPA purposes, which is defining the largest footprint that the bridge would take up. You could also see there would be protected bike lanes and a wide shared use path on both sides of the bridge. I'm trying to be objective and not advocate for this project, but I want folks to understand what might be some of the benefits of it. People can talk about what they see as the negative issues for sure. There's street connectivity is one thing. Like if we didn't have a river here, would the local streets on either side of Green Acres and Division connect to each other? You know, is that a benefit to have connectivity for all modes of traffic? The current Beltline bridge over the river is not seismically retrofitted. It's not seismically sound. So if we have a subduction zone earthquake, it's possible that that bridge will fail, and then there would not be a way to get across the river in this part of Eugene. I also want to let people know this ODOT consultant called Jacobs performed a greenhouse gas analysis a few years ago. It did not find that the project would increase greenhouse gases in terms of operations, not the construction. However, it did not look at a concept called induced demand, which is, would there be more driving if there's more travel lanes? And so I'm working with the Lane Council of Governments on potentially updating that study to look at induced demand and see what that would mean in terms of greenhouse gas impacts. And I think folks know that's important to the city of Eugene. I just also want to let folks know there's a bunch of other projects that the city is working on in that area that you might want to be aware of as you think about this project. So we're working on extending the West Bank path. Right now, from where the Lane County just built a section along Beaver, we have a project that's funded to build in a few years to extend it up along the western edge of Delta Sand and Gravel all the way up to Madison Middle School and the new Santa Clara Park that hasn't been constructed yet. We also have a funding to bring Hunsaker Lane, I think, to at least Tato to the east, but maybe a little further up to complete street standards with bike lanes and sidewalks and street trees or stormwater planters. We also—
Excuse me again, Rob, 2 minutes.
Okay, great, thank you. We have a project partially funded to build a series of roundabouts and an improved walking and biking environment along Division Avenue. It would be 3 roundabouts from Lone Oak, starting at Lone Oak, and then 2 at some of the driveways before you get to River Road. We also are working on a project to build a new pedestrian and bicycle bridge, which we're tentatively calling the Ruby Bridge, over Beltline west of River Road, so that kids who go to North Eugene High School don't have to travel through the interchange if they're walking or biking to school. And of course, other people could use it too. And over time, we'd look for like how to better tie that into the neighborhoods. We also are going to be making a recommendation to the Eugene City Council and the LTD board at a work session on February 28th for our Moving Ahead project, which has been looking at 5 major corridors in Eugene and how to make walking and biking and transit improvements on them. And the one corridor where we're making a recommendation for MX is River Road. And the basic idea for that is that south of Maxwell or so, we would reallocate 1 travel lane to buses in either direction. And then further north, there would be some widening right near the interchange so that buses could get through traffic as they go up to the new Santa Clara Transit Center. But for the most part, there would not be much widening of the road throughout the River Road neighborhood. And I think that's all I got.
Wow, thank you both. That's a lot of information to cram into that time.
And I'll figure out how to stop sharing the screen.
Thank you.
Here we go.
We will now move to Rob Innerfeld of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation to give a, I guess, citizen's perspective. Rob, would you like to start?
Only if you call me Rob Zeka rather than Rob Innerfeld. We are different people.
I apologize, my bad.
I am Rob Zeka. I'm executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation, and I've been involved in transportation planning issues for 25 years. I'm not here today to speak in favor or against the project, to provide some context. And I want to say three things. First, I want to pick up on Rob Interfeld's point about connectivity. If the river weren't there, we would have lots of streets going, connecting north and south or east and west. If you go down the Willamette River and you go to Harrisburg, to Corvallis, to Albany, they have one, two, or only one bridges across the river. But those three communities are basically on one side of the river. Eugene is built on both sides of the river, as is Portland. And if you're bicycling, you've got 5 options of how to cross the river. But if you're driving, there are only 4. There's the Beltline Bridge, the Washington Jefferson Bridge, the Ferry Street Bridge, and the I-5 Bridge. And so we have 2 sides of our community, and it's hard to get back and forth. So that might argue for building a local connection bridge. The second thing I'll say is, and Franny has talked about this, we're in what's called development of a project. Building a big project like this takes a lot of money, a lot of planning, a lot of time, sometimes decades. And you go through sort of a general concept, you do this environmental review, there's some long-term planning, and you get to a point where you have a sense of what you want to do and it's approved, but that doesn't mean it necessarily gets built because it doesn't necessarily have funding. The sort of development work can be done for millions of dollars. I don't know the exact budget. I'm sure Franny or Rob do, but $1 million here, a few $1 million there, $5–10 million. The construction of this, at least as it's listed in the regional transportation plan, is $100 million or so for the local bridge, another $700 million or so for Beltline. That's real money where I come from. And there's no dedicated funding source. We're not going to pay for that with, for example, Eugene gas taxes. We may not even pay for it with state gas taxes. Typically, a project like this needs to have a variety of sources, typically federal and state sources. And typically, it has to have a lot of political push behind it. For comparison purposes, the last big project built in this area that I'm aware of was the I-5 Beltline interchange. It was conceived of back in the 1990s. It was included in Transplan. It was the biggest project included in Transplan at the time. I think it was at the time listed $40 million. That's now been constructed or substantially constructed, but it's taken a generation to do so. It's ended up costing over $200 million. And Congressman DeFazio, Eugene City Council, Springfield City Council, Lane County have all put their weight behind this, and state legislatures to cobble together the funding for this. I'm not going to say whether or not the Beltline project should be constructed, but in order for it to get constructed, there would have to be a similar political push where the political leaders in not just Eugene, but in the county would just have to decide that this is probably the most important thing for our generation that needs to be built, and that other projects are going to be set aside until we have funding for this. That's really all I have to say. I look forward to the questions and answers. I just want to provide some context. Building big projects is a big lift, and it takes expertise, it takes funding, it takes political will. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob Zako. Now we move to the 2 people are here to speak in support of the project. I don't know if you have worked it out between you, Patrick and Kevin, as to who goes first, but I guess I'll wait to hear from you. You guys have 12 minutes.
Patrick, feel free.
I'll go right ahead. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity here, and Rob, and Franny. Good to see you guys again, and appreciate the updates. As a resident of Santa Clara area for a long time, raised my children. They've gone to North Eugene as well. They were avid bus users up and down the LTD corridor to get back and forth from school. I personally support this project. Now, there's different iterations, there's different design criteria that you can go back and forth. But for me, and the areas I've watched it grow over the years. You have to what our team has talked about is that continuity and connectivity for all modes of transportation. And I think having a local bridge between Green Acres and the Beaver Hunsacker area is vitally important to connect connect our communities. We look at LTD and the different things that we've done over the years, built this new station in the Santa Clara area, and we just heard that I guess the nod is to go up River Road with an MX project. I would argue and say, if you put it over to the Green Acres area, we'd have more connectivity and there'd be a lot more utilization and getting people actually out of their cars and where they need to go versus going downtown and then back up to someplace if they have it. I also think it's a big safety issue. Traffic coming around that area. Santa Clara is a destination area. We've got bedroom community, people working and playing in the area. We're going to get people back and forth, and having the bridges over the Willamette River are, that's the biggest choke point we have, especially in this area and in the city in general. And I think having those connectivity to this community in the right way is going to be a valuable asset as we go forward, just like the Ruby Street Bridge is going to be a valuable asset to move forward. I think the communication has been very well over the years with the stakeholders, ODOT, the city, and whatnot to tell us what they want to do. Hasn't been built yet. We've got a long way to go. I do know that. It's going to be very expensive. I do know that. But these are the type of things, if we want to go to that next level as a community, the safety is a big issue between River Road and Hunsacker, and River Road and Silver Avenue are two of the top 10 kind of, I guess, not deadliest, but certainly dangerous intersections in the area. I think having a better connectivity back and forth, east and west with the bike paths will be helpful. I really have concerns over some of the designs, just trying to fit it in. You're between well-developed areas. You have a lot of utilities on the north side of Division. Those could be underground, and you can get more real estate in that area and the utility easements that you have. So there is a lot of design constraints, and I'm not going to argue for or against, except for I do like the roundabout concept versus the overpass back and forth, north and south. I think that plays well. You'll go slower, you'll get lower collisions if you have any, but I think it'll flow well. And I think that overpass in that area is just a little too much, in my opinion. But I definitely think that we need to work together on this. I think there's a lot of moving parts, and having the idea and the opportunity to have that connectivity is super important. So I'll yield my time to you guys. Kevin, if you got some more.
Yes, I do. So as the chair of the Northeast Neighborhood Association, I've been intimately involved in this project for a number of years, and I want to thank both Franny and Rob for their vigilance and their hard work. This isn't just happening in a vacuum. This has been going on for quite some time, and they've been very receptive in listening to the concerns of my neighbors that are very concerned about the amount of congestion, with 6,000 new residents coming to our area in just the last 2 years, with several thousand slated for the next couple of years. The traffic has just gotten to the point where it's at a standstill. I mean, they're using Green Acres as an on-ramp to the Beltline. With Winco going in, that's going to double that traffic volume. So taking some of the pressure off of the Delta and the Beltline is going to really help the River Road area, because getting better flow for traffic is going to allow people that would normally use that as a way to get to and from their homes that are currently using alternative routes because of that congestion issue, such as using River Road instead. And so what this is going to do is allow for a lot more, I think, free-flowing traffic, both pedestrians and cars. Having access to the other side by bike is I think it's going to be hugely beneficial, especially with the plans for the development of the River Park system all the way past Delta, past River Ridge Golf Course. If you're looking at this thing in long range, long term, it's exactly what is needed. And I have to tell you that I'm so impressed with the amount of heavy lifting that both Rob and Franny have done over the last few years to get us to where we're at right now. And again, like they said, this isn't something that happens overnight. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort on a lot of people's parts. And a lot of the times what happens is the people that started in this project aren't the same people that are going to see this thing finished. So I would hope that you would allow these folks to keep you apprised like they have done for us. They've come and spoke to us many, many, many times and kept my neighbors completely apprised every step along the way as to where we were at with these projects. So they feel as though that they had a voice in what was happening and the direction this project was going. And they're all in favor of this because it just makes perfect sense. I've talked to several people whose concerns were, well, one of them was an ambulance driver who couldn't get his ambulance from the west side of Beltline to the east side of Beltline to the hospital. They had to go all the way around, and that's not acceptable. LTD called and told me, we'd love to bring in a direct bus all the way from Santa Clara River Road to the gateway, but we can't because we can't guarantee the time. We can't guarantee that we're going to be there on time. And so for these very reasons, I think it's an imperative that we look at taking the pressure off of these roads. And I really believe that by creating a better flow of traffic, you're going to minimize the amount of carbon monoxide in the air because they're not sitting there and using the on-ramp as a parking lot to hold traffic back or backing it way up to past the Cobra Road. Keeping it flowing freely, you're going to get less emissions in the air. And I think it's going to actually benefit us in the long run because people got to be able to get to their jobs. People got to be able to get their children to school. They've got to be able to get them to and from their extracurricular activities. And having a better and easier way to do that, this offers that solution. So again, I hope I'm not sounding like I'm beating this drum, but I can't thank Franny and Rob enough for all they've done. And we really saw this as an opportunity to solve a lot of the problems and pressures that we're feeling when it comes to transportation in our area. So I'd like just to thank you both very much.
Thank you both, Patrick and Kevin. And now we will move to Mark Rabinowitz and Jan Spencer to present the other side of the issue. And I believe Mark is going first. And I assume you want me to stop screen sharing, Rob or Mark? Mark, I don't hear you. Are you perhaps muted? Jan, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm unmuting. And Joshua, if I can do a screen share. It'll just take a moment for me to get myself,
go ahead.
Get myself geared up here. So let me get rid of that. Go here. Okay, can we see that?
Yes.
Is that visible when you can see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, I want to thank everybody here for both who presented and shared their opinions and the great turnout for this important topic. So thanks everybody for participating. I am going to read this. This, I feel, is the best way I can share my information. So you can even follow along while I'm speaking. So here we go. The state of Oregon and the city of Eugene have land use and transportation planning goals. River Road and Santa Clara neighborhoods have a draft neighborhood plan. Here are a few quotes taken from those documents. Maximize the conservation of all forms of energy based on sound economic principles. Our transportation system is environmentally responsible. Prepare health and social systems for a different future. A transportation system that is future-oriented, environmentally responsible, and transitions to zero carbon. Remember those key ideas mentioned above: conservation of energy, sound economic principles, environmentally responsible, health and social systems prepare for a different future. Widening Beltline would categorically betray all those and many other timely state and local planning goals. The Beltline controversy offers us an important opportunity to critically assess the effects of highway expansion and our car-centric transportation system by comparing them to these forward-thinking state, local, and neighborhood planning goals. The stated reason to widen Beltline is to reduce congestion, traffic accidents, and fatalities. Cars already kill about 40,000, injure millions more, and cause many hundreds of billions of dollars in public health, ecological damage, and property damage every year in the United States. Widening Beltline would facilitate more cars, more deaths, and more damage to people and planet. Cars and trucks are a major source of carbon dioxide that causes climate change. Telephone call. All that damage is external cost. External costs mean public health, the environment. You and me are, in practical terms, forced to subsidize the profits of the auto-centric transportation industry. That's not honest economics, especially considering many deaths, injuries, and damage to public health and the environment can be greatly reduced by using other approaches to transportation and land use design. Fewer cars and trucks means less damage to public well-being and the environment, and that money avoided on repair can be used instead in positive ways at scale from the home to the community and beyond. Historically, there is a frequent consequence to widening highways. It's called induced traffic. That means the new capacity attracts more cars, and often in a few years, the congestion returns and is even larger than before. Car-centric transportation discriminates against those with limited income, the elderly, the young, and those who simply don't want to drive, such as myself. Widening Beltline would not conserve energy. In thermodynamic terms, cars are extremely inefficient. They do not conserve resources. The great majority of a car energy is used simply to move the car. The load, for the most part, is insignificant. The bigger the car, the less efficient. The more cars, the less efficient, gasoline or electric. Cars and their infrastructure are expensive and resource intensive. There are alternatives to cars that use far less energy. Widening Beltline would not help prepare health and social systems for a different future. To assume the future will be a friendly extension of the present will prove to be deeply mistaken. The hundreds of millions spent on widening Beltline could deprive funding for transportation and land use planning appropriate for a different future for health, social conditions already coming into focus. Much highway infrastructure from 3 generations ago is needing many billions in repair. To build new highway infrastructure while older infrastructure is in expensive need for repair is simply irresponsible.
Excuse me, Jan, you and Mark have 7 minutes left.
Transportation and housing policy in the US has favored cars, highways, and suburbia going back almost 100 years. The controversy over Beltline provides us with an opportunity to reset our car-centric way of life towards the vision articulated in those sensible state, city, and neighborhood planning goals. There's no need for a new breakthrough in technology. The big breakthrough we need is in our own thinking for moving towards a more healthy and green future. So I want to mention a follow-up workshop Thursday, March 10 at 7 p.m. Here's the Zoom information. And I'll put this also into the chat. So this will be more available. And also, would River Road people be willing to support a letter to ODOT, the city, saying we oppose the widening of Beltline? And okay, that's it for me. Go ahead, Mark.
Mark, you have 5 minutes and 50 seconds.
Can I do the share screen too?
Sure, I think Jan needs to stop sharing his. There you go.
Okay, this is I'm Mark Rabinowitz. I actually have a long history with Jan. We were colleagues on the effort to prevent the West Eugene Parkway back a decade and a half ago. This is ODOT's map with a little annotation. If you look on their website, there
Mark,
are.
I don't see your square sharing.
What am I doing wrong?
Joshua, is he clear to share?
You just have to hit the share screen button and then pick the screen that you want to share and then click share button after that. Again, one more time.
Okay.
I'll start your time again for 6 minutes.
Okay, can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
So if you look very carefully at the ODOT map, and it helps to look at the version on their website, it has in tiny type the number of lanes. And yes, it would be a 6-lane bridge plus a 4-lane bridge for 10 lanes. But if you look on either side of the bridge, it's either 12 lanes or up to 16 lanes when you count all the ramps. So that would be a very large construction. It's overkill considering that we have peaked in traffic. And ODOT's own webpage, which I reference on the chart here, shows that our traffic in Lane County on the state highway system peaked 18 years ago. And the only thing that's kept it from dropping further has been tar sands and fracking. And those are temporary, highly polluting, very expensive. There is a low build option that ODOT is ignoring that they crafted almost a decade ago. And we need to consider low build options. The Delta Beltline interchange was $20 million, more or less. We're talking here about $1/3 billion and probably more when all the costs are considered. So there are several low build options. One is if we're going to build a new bridge, because the old one is worn out and seismically dangerous, well, that new bridge would probably be the Beltline relocation while they build the new Beltline bridges. And considering that traffic has peaked, we have climate change, we don't have enough money for this, and the oil's running out, and it takes a lot of fossil fuels to make concrete and steel, we need to be very efficient. And I'll just scroll through some of these. The whole presentation's on sustaineugene.org at the top of the page. In Oregon, traffic peaked just before COVID, and COVID closures cut carbon more than climate activism has ever done. We've had 40 years, 50 years of agreements and promises, yet the only things that have really cut emissions were recession a dozen years ago and now the pandemic. And nationally, traffic leveled off around 2007. Fracking and tar sands increased it. And then with COVID, we've had a transportation heart attack, which is a dress rehearsal for resource depletion. And can we heed the warnings? Aviation had an even sharper drop, and it hasn't come back, and we'll see if it ever does. Domestically, peak oil in the United States was 1970, and the recent increase has all been from fracking, and fracked wells deplete faster than conventional wells. Fracking peaked in 2020, just before the pandemic started, and we'll see if it can come back. There's technological reasons why it probably cannot. And the oil that we use here in Oregon mostly comes from the Alaska pipeline, which peaked at over 2 million barrels a day in 1988 and is now under 500,000 barrels a day. And when it declines a little further, it won't be able to flow at all because there's a minimum flow that's required to go through the pipeline in the winter. So some people think electric cars will solve the problem, but electricity's also peaked. And in Oregon, we're using natural gas to increase our use of electricity, but dams can't increase. Gas is probably maxed out. Wind is going up, but it's still a small percentage. And solar used to be in last place, but last year there was a big increase. and now it's not in last place anymore. So we have to learn to live within our limits, consider low build options that cost tens of millions instead of hundreds of millions, and act like there's a future that won't be, we're not going to keep growing forever on a finite planet. Privately, there are plenty of highway planners who understand this, but this is really about promoting more overdevelopment. And to do that, we need to have 10 lanes of Beltline plus the extended road. And that's just not physically or fiscally responsible for the future. And I think that's probably all the time I have.
You have a minute if you want it, Mark.
I just want to urge people to take a look at sustain-eugene.org, and you can see the full slides. There's also a legal argument. This has to be a project for 20 years in the future, not for current congestion. And it's anyone's guess what traffic levels will be in the 2040s. But with the Alaska pipeline out of the picture, conventional oil declining further, and plenty of other social disruptions probably in the future, the idea that we're going to need this for an increase in traffic, well, ODOT said this 30 years ago for the West Eugene Parkway, and the traffic projections that they threatened us with never came to pass. So, you know, we all pay for this out of our taxes. There's many ways this happens, whether it's federal or local dollars, but they're planning for a future that is not going to happen.
Thank you, Mark. So I'll put the timer back up again so we can go to Q&A. And what I will do is I will take anyone who wants to speak in turn. So if you raise your hands in the participants list, I'll call on you as you show up, and I'll give you up to 2 minutes to speak. And ideally, it would be questions, not statements, but that's your choice. Anyone wishing to ask a question? Harry, you're first.
Yeah, I'll jump in here since Mark was just mentioning projecting out 20 years. So perhaps this is for ODOT. What is the current traffic load on Beltline, and what is projected in the next 5, 10, and 20 years?
Franny,
I don't know
or-
that I have the, I
Go
don't know
ahead.
that I have the 20-year projection, but I know that, and this is a big range. 55,000 to 90,000 cars and trucks each day. And I think that varies between weekdays and weekends. So that's the current volume. And I don't at my fingertips have the projected. I don't know if Rob does, but I'll keep looking to see.
Big range. Okay, well, that's kind of an important thing. That's not a range. I want to know the average. How many cars go?
I'm sorry, who's speaking? Okay, next question. Michelle Renee, and put your hands up so I know who's next.
Yeah, I have a question about, John, you kind of characterized it as the, that Mark and Jan would present the other side of things. But are there more than two sides of things? Like, is it possible that maybe just the footbridge gets built, which adds a lot, or not the footbridge, but the other auxiliary bridge, but not widening Beltline? Are there options other than going for the biggest possible footprint?
Rob, you look like you want to answer that question.
Sure. Yeah, and I've been meaning to clarify that. So yes, and Franny, correct me if I'm wrong, but as a community, you know, our elected leaders could choose to just build a local arterial bridge. My understanding is there's still, first there needs to be some additional work done at the Delta Beltline interchange, which is around $20 million. And that because that needs to tie in with the new local arterial bridge that connects Green Acres to Division. But my understanding is those projects could be built, and that could be the rest of the Beltline project does not have to be constructed in order to get benefit from those first two phases. Is that, do I have that right, Franny?
Yes, and let me also add, I have like a draft implementation plan built based on phasing.
I could
And
share that if John were okay with it, but
Yeah, let me
it's up to you,
stop
John.
sharing.
Right. I think it's just going
and
to take
so
me a
Rob
minute
is
to.
right. Rob is right that the Delta interchange next phase could be the next, and then the local arterial that would take what like is projected to take 25% of the traffic off of the Beltline. Yeah, it's the next page down.
Right. Well, this shows you the different phases. So the one on the lower right would be the blue would be done first, and then the local arterial bridge in orange. Is that right, Franny?
Right.
And then this next.
It's important to
Yeah.
remember that when we talk about widening the Beltline, we're talking about adding a lane between the Delta and River Road for traffic that is only crossing the river. They're not going regionally. They're not trying to get through the area. They're just trying to go, because as you know, as you drive on the Beltline, as soon as you get over the bridge and as soon as you get past River Road and you're going westbound, things open up. You don't see the congestion. And the same if you're going eastbound. If you get past Delta and you're on your way to Coburg Road, things open up. So the whole idea is to focus on the congestion about getting over the highway. And you'll see that it says the yellow phase, Beltline, Willamette River bridges. At some point, those bridges are going to need to be replaced. And the thought is, and so you see that $85 million phase, at some place that point, they're going to have to reconstruct the bridges. And while they're reconstructing the bridges, they can add a lane for that lane that needs to connect to those interchanges between River Road and Delta. What else did I want to say about that? And then the other idea is Rob kind of mentioned this. And when you're building if we build the local arterial lane bridge second after the Delta interchange, we would have a secondary route over the river in case where the bridge were to fail or whatever, you'd have an alternate route. And also as a detour structure while you're building the Delta bridges themselves. Because you have to build one bridge at a time kind of thing. And you can divert traffic on a detour while you're building those bridges. That was kind of the thought about phasing it that way. Delta, then local arterial, then the river division interchanges that would improve operational flow at those interchanges. And then the Beltline bridges.
Thank you. I see Keith Higgins' hand. Keith, would you like to ask a question? I don't see any other hands up.
You're muted, Keith.
Now I have Bee's hand up.
Hello?
Yes.
John, this is Marv Leake, and I
Yes, please.
had a question for I think Rob and Franny, and that was that I actually got my driver's license and grew up on Beltline, and I can remember when we could leave River Road and go 55 miles an hour all the way to Lane Community College, and it was absolutely beautiful. What I've seen in the last 10 years with the increased traffic is, and I always wonder every time I go over that bridge, and Franny said it, I mentioned this about I think I went to one of the meetings back in 2014, but once you come across that bridge, it's open. It's open. And I always wondered about that. And I went back and I started looking at that years ago. And I always thought, I don't know what the sign regulations are. Is it, what would happen if right before the Delta Bridge, you just put a $300 42-inch aluminum signs on each side of the road that said positively no lane changing for next quarter mile? I mean, it's simple. Because where it comes is you have all the people that live north on River Road all come flying up in the fast lane, and then they all want to get over at the last section, which creates this caterpillar effect. And you completely it takes that right lane right down to nothing. And if you're lucky enough to get over in the left lane, you can breeze right through once you get past that sand and gravel exit. And I said, it's a low cost way to look at something. I know there's probably ramifications I have not thought about, but it's like, man, you could even if you could just use that while you were doing the development.
Let somebody, either Franny or Rob Interfeld, respond.
Okay.
Well, that's an interesting concept. And I remember when we were doing the I-105 construction project over Washington Jefferson, how we put up a sign that said zipper merge. And it made a huge difference in the operation. People weren't waiting for the last minute to zip over. They were allowing traffic to get in one car at a time in front of them, and creating like a zipper for the merging cars and giving enough room for the merging traffic to come on. And it created very little disruption to the flow. That's the kind of principle that we put in place with the ramp meters, metering, trickling in traffic. And if the through traffic would stay in the left lane and let the merge traffic come in and then zipper in, you could have improved operations. So I agree.
Thank you. Rob, did you want to add?
I don't have anything
No,
to add.
okay. Kathy Martini, I believe. Do you have a question, Kathy? You're muted. I'm sorry, Kathy, you're still muted. How about if I come back to you? Keith Higgins, are you ready for a question?
Yes, thank you. I have wanted to add a small amount of information here about we're talking about in the future, all of this projects are going to take a long time. This is a great time to come in while we have this fresh. A small push will make great changes now while we want to be able to get the traffic on Beltline figured out. Some of the traffic goes south towards West 11th. Some of it goes north towards Junction City to the airport. At some point, I want to add the thought of bringing in Coburg Road Bridge to the airport north of town. And that way you would relieve the northern traffic from Beltline. Also, you have a lot of traffic that would go from Coburg up into the mountains of Marcola. From there, you would have the southern traffic is a problem with the West 11th Franklin Boulevard or Martin Luther King Boulevard conglomeration there. That there's traffic things that could be tweaked with on the south side of town, even at the level of 30th Avenue, 29th Avenue, where it runs over to Chambers. You can do things with traffic. The belt line was never finished. A belt line is something that goes around the town, and the belt line could be made to come out at the college. And so you would drag a lot more traffic into town on that side, thus relieving the River Road area for just through traffic on Beltline. It sounds great. It's beautiful. It sounds like a lot of money. I'd like to hear more about tunneling under the
Keith,
river.
let's see if we
I'm
have any
done.
responses. Thank you. Franny or Rob Interfeld, would you like to respond? And we have about 10 minutes left.
I believe he was suggesting a new bridge north of Eugene to connect Coburg over the river, and that's not within the city of Eugene, so I'm not going to speak to that.
And go to the,
Yeah, you are correct about the Beltline. And I wasn't here for the whole history of the city and what's gone on, but my understanding is that the folks in South Eugene did not want to have the Beltline go and connect to 30th. But I wasn't here then, and I don't know what the history is of the whole general area. But I will tell you that the mayor of Coburg, Ray Smith, often talks about this project being important, and he would like to see the traffic congestion and the Beltline get resolved, because people do avoid the Beltline and then go into Coburg and create traffic problems in Coburg. So
There are a
the
lot
fact
of, yeah.
that the fact that Beltline is congested does affect the whole region. That's what I
The,
know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Franny. There's a lot of old maps that show all the highways people wanted to build back, in the 60s and so, and yeah, we're not going to entertain extending Beltline south of West 11th. It's just not on the table. That's not something that the community would support in Eugene. For the most part, we're looking at how to make the roads and the streets we have work better for traffic. So like looking at how to make our traffic signals work better. We're not looking at widening streets in Eugene for motor vehicles, except for buses, if we ever do widen streets. Where we are looking to potentially make it easier for people to drive would be on the ODOT facilities, but not on our city streets, and not by building new highways.
Thank you, Rob. Kathy Martini, you are now unmuted.
Okay, I just would like to ask a question about the zippering effect and better lane signage. Would it not also be beneficial to have a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit through the area from River Road beyond Delta there? Just seems that if the traffic slowed down, we didn't have the 60-mile-an-hour people with people trying to pull in. If it was a 40-mile limit, it would help a lot through that area. Is that true? Would it help?
Thank you, Kathy.
I think
Traffic
that there's
folks.
something called like an advisory speed limit, and we can look into that, and we can look into the suggestion earlier about the lane changing. But my sense is, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that there are places where they lower speed limit during times of congestion, and so that the traffic can flow better and to make it safer. But then when there's very light traffic, they move it back to the regular speed limit, and so I think that would be probably more acceptable to the engineers who are in charge of setting speed limits, and I can look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have 8 minutes left, so forgive me, those of you who are not River Roaders, but I'm going to go to a couple of folks who I know are River Roaders to ask their questions. And Jan, would you again put the URL for your follow-up meeting in the chat so folks can go there if they'd like? Gary Reber, question.
Yeah, Fran said that roundabouts were safer then, but she never said what. I don't know. I would question that a roundabout is safer than, say, a four-way stop.
Okay, Fran or Rob?
I don't remember saying that tonight, but I do think that roundabouts are safer because the traffic gets slowed down, and what happens at a stoplight and also a stop sign is a lot of rear end collisions. Whereas in a roundabout, as we've seen, the traffic is slowed down, but it's also consistent speeds. And you're only looking to the right. I mean, you're merging traffic from the left and only having to look one way. So there's only one collision point rather than 4. So that's why they're considered safer.
It's almost impossible for someone in a car to die in a roundabout crash. And even people walking and biking, because the speeds come way down. You can't like run a roundabout the way you can run a stop sign or run a red light. We have around 7 people die every year in Eugene on our roadways and around 35 really serious injuries, and roundabouts are much safer. 4-way stops are not designed to carry the level of traffic that a roundabout can carry. They're really, for the most part, for more higher traffic intersections. I mean, there's some crossover, like we're going to look at putting one at North Kenzie and Green Acres, but for the most part, they're for higher volume locations than a 4-way stop would be.
And apparently they're also good for carbon reduction and carbon monoxide reduction, because you're not having the stop and go traffic for trucks and cars. You're just having consistent movement. So that does cut down on carbon.
Thank you. Sandra Gladney.
Thanks. My question is about the current bridge. Does it have a safety status rating, and does it have a projected fail date? Yeah, I understand it's not seismically retrofit, but what's its current life?
That's a good question. It's considered to be not critical, because if it was, it's in poor condition, but not critical enough that they have to jump on it right now. There's other bridges way in line first. There's no like cracking that's concerning to them. They're not afraid of it falling down or that cars would crash like in some bridges we've seen around the nation. But they monitor it both underwater and on the deck and under the deck. And what they do, what they typically do is keep the bridge in good enough condition by deck replacements and things like that. You know, holding it together with steel and things like that. But they said that it would need to be replaced within 20 years. That's the last I've heard.
Thank
But
you.
it does get a lot of wear and tear. And you probably know that from all the trucks and the Delta sand and gravel trucks that go over it. So it is a very active bridge. It moves with the traffic.
Thank you, Franny. So we've got 3 minutes left. Zach, I'll let you go next, and please make your question short so the answers can come out.
Thank you. My understanding is that a lot of the traffic on Beltline Bridge is coming from to and from 105 via Delta Highway. And I was wondering if there are any options to try and get some of that traffic to cross the river further south, either a bridge further south between I-5, Beltline and I-105, or additional on and off ramps at off 105, like at First Street. Thanks.
Not at this time. There was a concept to have a connection, and Rob, you'll have to help me with this because I don't remember, but at Valley River Center, and that was one that died back in the early 90s. But that's the only other connection that I've heard for another bridge over the Willamette.
I feel like half the people here would run me out of this meeting if I brought up the Valley River Bridge, so I'm not going to talk about that. But I think Zach may have suggested having ramps come onto First Avenue from I-105. We get complaints from the Whitaker neighborhood that people from River Road cut through their neighborhood on First Avenue to get downtown. So we are actually going to be looking at some point, I'm hoping, at a project to traffic calm First Avenue, because they feel like it's a really unsafe street in their neighborhood. So please don't take First Avenue if you're going downtown.
Thank you. We do have a minute and a half left. So Sai, can you get your question in?
Sure. I'll try and make it quick. So you mentioned the 20 years before the replacement of Beltline, and thank you for the person who asked the question that got that answer. So my question is, what would be the cost of the maintenance in 20 years versus what would be the cost of the redesign in 20 years? And then what would be the cost difference between those two?
Well, I'm not sure what the maintenance would be for the fixing of the bridge. So I'd have a hard time making that comparison, and I don't have that information with me tonight. I'd have to look at the bridge condition report, talk to a bridge engineer and find out what could be done to keep it held together for 20 years and what that cost would be. I can do that, but I just don't have it with me. And then the cost for a new bridge widened is 85 million. So we could look at that, but I'd have to ask the bridge engineer for that information, which I can do.
Thank
Sure.
you. We have reached the witching hour, so I want to thank Franny Brindle of ODOT, Rob Interfeld from the city of Eugene, Rob Zako from Best, Patrick Kerr from Santa Clara neighborhood, Kevin Reed from Northeast neighborhood, Mark Rabinowitz, and Jan Spencer for making this a lively, interesting, and informative discussion. In the chat, Jan has listed another URL for another Zoom meeting for those of you that might want to continue this discussion. But in fairness to our members and to keep to the schedule, I will call it good. Thank you, everybody, very much. It was a great meeting.
Hey, John,
Yes?
don't forget to record the chat.